Casser-Jayne, and welcome to the Halli Casser-Jayne Show, a smart, witty, and timely podcast brought to you at a time when Americans are getting fed up with all the shouting and bickering in Washington, D.C. So I, Halli Casser-Jayne, and veteran White House correspondent Matthew Cooper are here to offer you an insightful, engaging journey into the world of politics, always with a smile, and dialogue that snap, crackles, and pops, and with our very special guests. We strive to offer a different take on all things politics in our weekly conversations. So, pour yourselves a martini, grab a spot on your favorite sofa, and have a listen as we tackle it all, and like to stir, and yes, sometimes shake things up. On this episode of the Halli Casser-Jayne Show, politics ain't soybeans, Midwest farmers are learning as Trump ups the ante in his trade war with China. Donald Trump Jr. caved and will testify before the Senate Intelligence Committee. Abortion rights are taking a beating, and everyone wonders if Roe v. Wade can survive. This week, in anti-Semitism, Joe Biden continues to surge in the polls. Florida, and a very special guest, Andrew L. Seidel, talks about his provocative new book, The Founding Myth, in which the author asks if Christian nationalists are un-American. These stories and more, and we're just beginning. Here we go. Good evening, my friend Matthew.
Hello, Halli. How are you?
I am fine. I was going to say something else, but I'm fine. Do you like the way my voice sounds? Can you hear it's real raspy today?
I do.
Isn't that kind of cool?
I like it. It's a little Marlo Thomas, and I like it.
Oh, Marlo Thomas. Okay, well, there you go.
Brenda Vaccaro, for those of us who remember.
Oh, well, there you go. I really love her. Whatever happened to her, by the way?
Yeah, I think she passed away recently.
Oh, no, don't say that. True?
I hope I'm wrong.
Oh, I hope you're wrong. Because so many people, good people have been dying. Doris Day died.
I know.
That broke my heart up.
I hear you. So,
how do we get from Doris Day to Trump in a trade war?
We'll just jump right into it.
I'm throwing that over to you. Talk. What? Huh?
Well, look. I mean, you can't say he didn't do what he promised, right? He's launched these tariffs on China. They're due to take effect. The Chinese have retaliatory tariffs, and the stock market is off pretty significantly because of it. And look, it's an old-fashioned trade war, and it's hard to see how it plays out. On the optimistic side, everybody kind of backs down. The tariffs don't get implemented in the end, and things kind of go back to normal. On the other hand, it could accelerate, and that's bad for the U.S. economy. It's bad for China. Ideally, you want to use the threat of tariffs to try to get what you want and never actually have to employ them. But I don't think Trump has been nearly so subtle.
I find it interesting. He's not wrong here. There is an unfair kind of balance thing going on that everybody's been afraid to deal with for a very, very long time. He does have an economy to back him up now. You have to give him that too, because the hurt may not be, broadly speaking, as tough as it would be at another time.
There's no question. Right. It's not as intense as it might be at a different time.
But it's ballsy.
It's a ballsy move. It's the thing he probably believes in the most, this idea that the world is ripping us off. I think before he was into building walls and banning Muslims and other things that became his later interests in his golden years. This is what he believed in. And so he's doing it, but he seems remarkably ignorant of how it works. He seems to think China pays a tariff. That's not how tariffs work. No. American businesses and consumers pay tariffs. We stick a tax on a Chinese product coming in here, and we pay that tax in an effort to discourage the consumption of that imported good. And he doesn't seem to understand it. He keeps saying, well, they're going to pay us the tariffs. So, he's really... I
mean, it's like, can nobody get through to this guy and explain things, or is his brain just incapable of taking...
He's not strong on the whole, economics 101 type thing.
But here's the thing. Who it is going to hurt, who it is hurting right now, are those poor farmers in the Midwest. And it's going to hurt poor schmucks like you and me, right?
Because that's exactly right.
And those are the very people he needs to vote for him. I'm starting to see a lot of Midwest farmers coming on air saying, now, wait a minute here. Maybe you're on a bridge too far. Curious.
There's no question there's some crops and some products that get affected really directly. Now, if you're buying a washing machine, you can make some choices and you don't have to take the more expensive Chinese thing, assuming the tariff goes through. But there's plenty of other stuff to buy. But if your job is to grow soybeans and really your only market is China, you're kind of screwed.
I would say so. I would absolutely say so. And the other part is I like the way his talk is about, and we're going to get all this money coming in and we're going to give it to everybody. How?
He doesn't really understand how it works. But look, there is, as you say, there is a case for getting tougher on them on trade. And I think if done carefully, it's a good use of sort of bluster and policy. But I don't think he's really got the stuff to do it right. Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, and the people around him are so strange as well.
It's not the brightest bulbs. Yeah.
No, absolutely not. At this point, I don't even think their bulbs are lit. I think that they're, flickering, kind of thing. They're flaming out. We move on.
So what else are we thinking about this week?
Well, I can't wait. I have to go right there. I have to go to This Week in Anti-Semitism.
This Week in Anti-Semitism.
You missed her calling.
Yes.
You should have been an announcer.
Yes.
Darling.
Congresswoman Tlaib from Michigan.
This is complex. This is not as simple as people want to think that it is. Because if you take some of the lines that she said, about how,
yeah.
Right.
Right.
Take it. Explain it.
Well, Congresswoman Tlaib, who's of Palestinian background and has said a lot of controversial things, was on a podcast this past week, sponsored by Yahoo, in which she talked about the Middle East and the emigration of Jews to Palestine before, during, and after World War II. And she made the claim that, Jews were fleeing the Holocaust and that she was, I think she used the words calmed or relaxed, with the knowledge that they were able to find safe haven in Palestine, and woe that they should have been more kindly towards the Palestinians, but at least they were able to come to Palestine. That's kind of the germ of what she said.
And the Palestinians were so good to them, they just shot them up and raided them.
Yeah, she didn't really even get into the treatment of the Jews. It was a totally one-sided idea that kind of Jews showed up one day and we're glad they escaped the ovens, but they turned out to be lousy neighbors because all they did was conquer us and plunder us.
So right. And so you start.
Well, we've now reached the point where we're slightly grateful that she acknowledged the Holocaust. Like that was okay, or at least she's not like a denier. That's good, but obviously it's a much more complicated picture, right? There were Jews in that disputed area of the world long before World War II. Many sought to escape from the Nazis.
Long before the Nazis, you can go back to World War I. You can go back to, of course. I mean,
yeah,
and you can go back to time in memoriam if you really want to get.
Yeah, and there was not a country called Palestine there. It was run by the Ottoman Empire, and then by the British after World War I. So, in any event, the Jews who emigrated there were not met warmly by the Arabs there. There was a lot of, in fact, they put a lot of pressure on the British protectors of that region to cut Jewish immigration dramatically.
Which
most
they did.
Of those, most of those who didn't make it to Palestine ended up perishing in the Holocaust. Basically the Palestinians didn't want the Jews there. And
let me say something else. Can I interject one thing here? Because I think this is often missed, Matt. Guess what? There were many Jews who are native to that land who were living on that land. Nobody ever wants to talk about that. So let's just throw that little piece into the historical
there are lots of Jews there. Lots of Jews there already. More Jews want to come.
Right. Okay.
Palestinians resisted them.
Yeah.
It's a complicated history.
But she messed with history, and you can't do that. And so here's where I want to take it, though. So we know that's the history of it, guys. The minute it happened and the minute it blew up and the minute the Republicans, because they're you can't blame them, she gave them a bone and they gnawed and they took and they ran. Ilhan Omar and Nancy Pelosi immediately came to her rescue.
Well, that was part of the problem. Yeah, she got attacked in a blunderbuss way by the Republicans. The Democrats kind of defended her, but really so much of what she said was erroneous. I think we're just dealing with kind of like a massive ignorance of history here.
And but my problem is the Democratic Party has not got itself in a good position on all of this, and they need to figure out what's going on the left of that party.
Well, I think that's totally right. Yeah.
In a hurry. And every time we have one of these flare-ups, which turns out to be every week, which is why we have our segment this week in anti-Semitism.
Right.
I think there's a little bit too much and a little bit too much defense, and something needs to be worked out about this, because it will impede. It will hurt the party. There's no question about it.
Oh,
Sooner
it's a
or
mess.
later, right? It's a mess. Because by the way, we're two Jews and we're not thrilled with this. So, and we're two, lean Democrat, if not
Jews.
Democrat.
Two reasonable Jews.
Two reasonable Jews. So I just wanted to throw that out. But while all of that's going on, let me also throw this one out at you. It's a year today the Jerusalem embassy opened. And the reason I wanted to bring that up is because it's just something I want to say about it. The sky didn't fall, Matt.
No.
War did not break out. It was a no big dealer. I think Trump is on to something with this whole thing with the Middle East, because of course as things shift, and they have shifted there, because nobody wants to talk about Israel and the Palestinians. There are bigger, problems, which we'll talk about in a minute. But here's what I wanted to say about it, and that is the sky didn't fall. Things can be done, and they're going to go through. And the Palestinians,
precisely. I think we're in a new era, and the fear of the Arab street is abated.
Yeah, I think so.
In a lot of ways.
I think so. So it's let's keep that in mind, because I think some things are going to happen. I think in the next couple of months, son-in-law is about to come up with putting out his Middle East plan, and then we have this little problem called Iran.
Right.
Talk to me.
Well, the president has moved additional firepower into the region, and there's a lot of saber rattling about Iran. There's some speculation that they might have been behind the sabotage of some oil ships in the region. And their kind of war drums are kind of beating. John Bolton, the president's national security advisor, has been very hawkish on Iran, has, made a case for actively pursuing regime change. And, it's I think people are wary. Iran is, and they should be, Iran is a real country. It's a lot bigger than Iraq.
Exactly.
About 80 million people live there. It's got mountains that are higher than the Alps. It's about the size of Alaska. I mean, this is not a small endeavor.
And it has weapons.
And they got a lot of weapons. They have the 8th largest army in the world. It's a serious force, and you have to figure out, what you're trying to accomplish and how you get out, not just how you get in.
Well,
and,
not only that, can I just throw this one thing out? Trump denied that he sent in these troops, by the way, today. He said, I would have sent a whole lot more than 120,000 troops. No, except he did.
Yeah.
I mean, it's another Trump, crazy. This is nuts.
Look,
this is totally nuts.
Look, the threat of force, used properly is a familiar and longstanding tool of diplomacy. And in the right hands, it's an effective tool. But,
he's not dealing with a full
But like
death.
a knife or a rope, it can be misused.
Hello and yes. And particularly with the characters that he has, not just Trump. It's his whole cast of characters that he's got around. I was not a fan of the deal that was made with the Iranians. And so I thought it was a bad deal for a lot of different reasons. And so that didn't freak me out when he kind of backed off from that, although I think that it's a stupid thing to do once the deal is cut, because it leaves you looking like you're not a country we can make a deal with. So there was that. But I don't see they're doing anything to rock the boat. They're not.
The Iranians.
Yeah.
I think they're just continuing their usual, funding of proxies and with Hamas and Hezbollah and stuff, and in Yemen, that's pissing off our allies, the Gulf states. But in general, they haven't really upped things that much. Yeah. I mean, this is,
But there's a reason they want to go to battle, and is it Bibi Netanyahu is saying, let's do it now before we can't do it. It's a very strange circumstance. And what does Russia have to do with it all? And Syria have to?
And the Europeans, they're
freaking out.
They're done with these sanctions, and they don't want a war. Right. And so I wish better hands were in charge.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you on that. Okay, moving on. Attorney General Barr orders an investigation into the investigation. It just strikes me.
At least they're not like ordering, investigation into Hillary's emails.
Well, they'll be going after Anthony Weiner in a couple of days, saying there's more to that story now that he's out of jail.
Yeah, I mean, this is Trump and the right are clearly, completely agitated about how the FBI investigation came to be in the first place about Russia. It seems to me it's pretty clear they had some substantial evidence to work with, but I don't think there's anything per se wrong about investigating how that thing started.
There is something here,
but they clearly want to, come up with something that makes it look like it was all fake.
Well, they're going to look until they find something. That's the first thing, because he needs that, because he knows what's coming in the next couple of months. So that's why he is desperate to find out. If we can just make up something up by one little tiny thing that's a flaw in it, we'll do that. But I bring it up partly because of that reason, but also because I want to say another example of Barr doing the president's bidding, and it's really a disgrace, and it's really disgusting. And, you just watch the Republicans go, okay, this is okay. This is fine. Attorney General is working for Trump and not for the United States of America. It's just nuts. Okay.
It's crazy.
Okay. And speaking of that, let's talk nuts. Junior, I love to call him Junior. By the way, does Junior wear a flak vest all the time?
Yeah, he might.
Take a look at him next time you see him on TV.
Maybe he's just working out.
Barrel chested. I've never seen a chest like that in my whole entire life.
Yeah, don't get
it. Anyway, he apparently reached a compromise. Some said caved, with the Senate Intelligence Chairman Richard Burr, the Republican, to come to Capitol Hill in mid-June to answer the committee's questions.
Well, that's good.
2 to 4 hours. What you thinking? You thinking, well, that's just good.
I'm glad he didn't continue to defy the subpoena. There were really no grounds. I mean,
he's a private citizen.
Yeah, the flimsy grounds of executive privilege don't apply to him. So
he had no choice.
He really had no choice, but it's good it didn't drag on, I think. And, I think, look, it is a Republican-chaired committee. I don't think he's exactly going to get, guillotined.
I don't know. I heard something today to the tune of that they definitely have him on saying two different things to different people.
Right. Well, the fact that they're, bringing him back gives him a chance to get out of it. Normally if you'd say that, normally they just slap the perjury charge on.
I think I don't remember who it was, because I was in interviews all day today. It was crazy. It was started early. It just kept going. Like, my head. But in between, I was trying to keep up with the news, because you and I were going to talk later tonight, which we're doing. And, there may be a there on him. I just want to remind everybody that Mueller never talked to him. Always odd. So he may be part of another investigation that's going on.
Well, that's a good point. It could be, that's a good point. I mean, we just don't know if he's, really in danger of a perjury trap or not.
Can I bring up Lindsey Graham in the context of this?
Sure.
Good. I call him now Graham Cracker. We had that conversation last week. He crackered this week.
Yes, he said he's not going to do his own little investigation of this.
But listen to me. He told the kid to plead the fifth. He's the head of the committee of judiciary. He advised Junior to plead the fifth. If this had been any other time in history, this guy would have been hung.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, look, I don't know if it's because John McCain died or what, but he's all in with Trump. Yeah, they all seem a little demented.
Drunk.
I don't know.
Now, the only thing that I can think on, listen, I'm firmly convinced that what it is that, and it was what Mr. Fixer used to do for Trump, and we have example after example after example that Michael Cohen would get goods on people and use it against them. And I just think that that's what Trump does. He's got something on each and every single one of them. And then there you go.
Whatever it is.
It's whatever it is, it's all utterly peculiar. A story broke in the New York Times. I don't know if you saw it. It happened late this afternoon. The House Intelligence Committee is investigating whether lawyers tied to President Trump and his family helped obstruct the panel's inquiry into the Russian election interference by shaping false testimony.
I did not get a chance to see that one, but
New York Times.
Put it on the list.
I think this one is, listen, the New York Times was 99.9%, according to the Mueller report, accurate in their reporting.
Yeah.
This one's weird. Now, I didn't get a chance to look at it because it was happening just in between all the crap that I was going through today. But what I wanted to bring it up for is to say, if in fact that's true, that must be part of another investigation going on. It says the House Intelligence Committee is investigating it, but it seems to me Mueller might have pushed that off to something else. That's another strange. I mean, he had to have known that, Mueller.
You would think, right?
Right, and it wasn't in the Mueller report.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
There's so many cul-de-sacs here.
Cul-de-sacs. I call them rat holes.
Or rat holes.
They're horrible, horrible rat holes. All right, now we're going to go to my favorite subject, Florida.
Yes.
All right, listen to this.
Interesting.
This is totally ridiculous. Let me tell you why this is so totally ridiculous. Florida was hacked. Two counties. It is now out. They were hacked. And it was more than just little stuff. They got into the goods, so to speak. Now, I want to bring this up because I might have mentioned this to you, Matt. Remind me if I did, and if I didn't, I told everybody else. During the election, when Bill Nelson, then senator, longtime senator, Democrat, running against the former governor of Florida, right, Rick Scott, and running, DeSantis was running for the governorship, which he got another Republican. Bill Nelson, at the very end of the campaign, said loudly and clearly, nobody's doing anything here. You're governor. You're my competition, blah, 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 blah. But Florida was hacked.
Yeah.
Rubio, DeSantis, Scott turned it into Bill Nelson's an old cranky. He's got Alzheimer's disease, blah, 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 blah. And they made him the laughing stock. And on that, I've always contended that was a big part of his losing.
Absolutely.
And now today, this.
It seems very different. Yeah, very different.
Now this is weird because this is up your kind of alley. Tampa Bay Times said it was 2 counties. DeSantis admitted it and says he can't talk about it. He's been silenced by the FBI.
Yeah.
Whoa, baby.
Well, that's as serious as it gets.
Why would the FBI want this silenced?
Well, I think in investigations and grand jury investigations, they always ask witnesses to, we'd prefer you to be quiet, but you're not obliged to be.
But why the grand jury? Why would this is part of the whole gig about Russia hacking.
Yeah. I think generally when they interview witnesses, having been on the receiving end, they encourage you not to talk about it, but they can't compel you to. Yeah, well, that's it. It's the gift that lasts a lifetime.
Yeah, I understand. Are you, by the way, speaking of that lifetime, are you going down to Texas and are you going to help Valerie Plame get elected?
I'm not helping any candidates. And New Mexico. She's in New Mexico.
New Mexico.
Pretty part of the world, downtown.
It's one of my very, 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 very favorite places in the whole wide world, actually. But to go back to this Florida thing, though, I think this is huge. And the fact that this was more than, this was getting into, to voting stuff. And, they keep saying, Matthew, none of this affected the election. Crapola.
Yeah, I don't think we really can be so sure about that.
How close was the vote in Florida? I don't remember.
Damn close. And obviously the national vote was very close. So I don't think we should be at all certain. Now, we may never be able to discern exactly.
I think they can
precisely
discern
what happened, but I think we can make assumptions. And
I believe we can discern. That's what I believe. I believe. Yeah. Okay. But so they don't want to because it would start a civil war. But it's my contention that they know exactly what happened, exactly what it affected, who it affected, how it affected, and they're just never going to go there. And it's the one time I think the Democrats are totally wrong, because the Democrats should have been opening up a mouth about this in a much bigger way, because, again, it's that playing, fighting fire with fire. They should have done it. So,
totally.
You agree with me?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'm so happy.
No, I agree.
No, I'm glad. I'm glad. Okay. Before we get into election 2020, I want to just bring up another little point about Mr. Trump trading endorsements with Tom Cotton. Did you see that yesterday and today?
I didn't see that.
Okay. Mr. Tom Cotton, who, by the way, is only worth about $500,000, which is not very much if you're a member of Congress, right?
Yeah.
Came out swinging for Trump on the trade deal, saying, you can absorb it. It's not a big deal. Forget about it.
Right.
Very first tweet this morning, Tom Cotton apparently has a new book, and Trump tweeted about what a wonderful, terrific, oh my God, bestseller going to be, Tom Cotton. And people just sit there and say, this is okay. I know.
When you're overwhelmed with crap, you're standing in shit river, and we're in shit river. This is just one part of shit river. Yeah.
My contention is this, and you know how I always bring up these little details, and I know you roll your eyes at the other end. But here's I think the Dems would be good to start working on these little tiny finite details and making hay out of them.
No, that's true.
Then the bigger issues that go right over most people's heads because they can't get it.
No, that's true. They could get more out of these things.
They don't do it.
That's true.
They just don't do it. They need to hire me.
They do. They do need you.
They need me. They definitely need me. Because that's the only way. They just don't have that instinct. They just don't have it. All right, let's move to election 2020. Biden is surging, my darling. Surging. Yeah. Oh my God, 26-point lead.
Yeah, crazy. Well, go Joe, go. I think clearly the Democratic electorate is a little different than the elites who were writing him off as yesterday's news and insisting that he didn't grovel to Anita Hill sufficiently. He'd be goner, and that doesn't appear to be the case.
No, and I think something that's very interesting about it besides that is that it appears to, first of all, it's the Twitter universe. That's all the elites, like you said, and they have they are wrong.
Yeah.
They are the left of the left of the left of the left, or the right of the right of the right of the right. They are not in the middle. So there's no representation there. I'm going to talk about that at the end of the segment to go into it with you. But the thing is, they're missing the boat here. And his lead with blue, it's everywhere. I mean, he's just taking it, so that when the Republicans, and this is the first big mistake I've seen them made, the GOP person who tweets on Twitter keeps talking about socialism and this, that, and the other thing. And I'm like, you guys are wasting your breath, because guess what? The socialists have lost control of the Democratic Party.
It certainly is starting to seem that way.
I would say this party is center, 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 center.
That's what I said.
Okay. So 22 Democrats now in the field. It's a circus. It's pathetic.
Yes, it's crazy. It's a lot of people, but, look, hey, just, keep the band growing, I mean, the Montana governor got in it today, and, let's just keep the party going.
I think it's too much, and I think it diffuses the power of all of them, other than Joe. That's what I think.
I agree, but, it is what it is. Yeah.
Did we say that at the same time?
It is what it is.
It is what it is. Yeah. Okay. Elizabeth Warren turned down Fox town hall, said it because Fox's hate for profit racket. I disagree with that. You don't go in. Huh?
Yeah. Yeah. I think you go where the voters are.
Yeah. I think that's a big mistake on her part. And I don't think, and it's not I'm wondering why she did it.
I think it's a mistake. I think Bernie and Buttigieg had it right. You just go where the voters are.
Right. But she did it for a reason, because she knew.
Yeah, I think you get the liberals fired up. I mean, it's a calculation.
So you think it's a calculation. I think she was looking for something different, or something to play some kind of game.
Also, she's going to get a lot of, all that Indian stuff. She's going to get tons of it. Like Fox is not going to be content to just have one person.
No. What are they? They don't call her Pocahontas. They turned it into a positive for her against Trump. Chocahontas or something. I don't know. It's crazy.
That's funny.
The Zogby poll. So he's a little weird, right, Zogby?
Yeah, it's not the most reliable poll, but
has Trump at 51%, winning on the economy with millennials and indies that saying they've moved in his direction. I find that just not believable.
It's an outlier. You always have to discount an outlier poll. It's probably not that, but look, he's, it's not impossible. He gets there before too long. I mean,
yeah, I don't know. I thought that one was, he's going to go up now. Outlier. He's going to go up and up and up because as the Mueller thing quiets down, which is why the impeachment thing has got to come back on board.
Yeah,
because
totally.
They have to. That's the only way to stop him. Because every time that kind of bubbles to the top, things get very, very crazy. People react to it. Everybody gets nervous, and rightfully so. I want to talk about Alyssa Milano very quickly. She's calling for a sex strike because of that heartbeat anti-abortion law thing that happened in Georgia and in other states, which is whatever. I just want to say I agree with her. I'm opting that women say no to men. You want to start telling us what to do about all this stuff? Then you don't get any sex. She heard that from me because I posted that long before she came up with the word sex strike. I just want to say that. But I also want to say this. It gives a whole new meaning to Trump's HRC cry, lock her up.
Yes, good point. You make a good point.
If this were any other night and you weren't rushing like a lunatic to get off there.
I'm sorry.
You would be laughing your head off, and I would be pissed off that you're not laughing your head off.
I'm sorry.
Totally am, because it was such a great line. And you could use it in a stand-up comedy routine. It was such a good line.
Keep it. It's a good one.
Anyway, but Justice Kennedy gave a little talk and said he's very concerned that Roe v. Wade is going to be overturned because they're starting to mess with that, the Supreme Court. But we'll pick that up another time. Do you want to make mention before we close of the NRA, who is in deep gaga?
Oh my God, what a shit show.
This is really starting to be like bizarre.
Well, it was just a bunch of grifters. I mean, they're all just scamming each other.
Question, are they under like a group like that because they're a non-prof, right?
Yeah.
Don't they have to answer to somebody when they start to see that the money was being spent on 25?
Well, sure. I mean, you can't abuse your tax status. This is what, people have been going after the Trump charities for. Yeah, I mean, there's potentially IRS, regulations and laws that
I don't know where they're
violated here. It's not clear yet, but just leave that aside. You've got one of the most feared lobby in Washington turns out to have no money because they're pissing it away. I mean, it's crazy.
It is crazy, but like I said, I'm surprised that nobody like, New York and Southern District or somebody didn't, move in like in a quick and go, let's look at your books, what's going on here, and close them.
Yeah.
It's not going to come out of it.
I think it would be up to the Virginia Attorney General could go in there, but he's the guy with the sex assault charge, so that's the word.
Oh, my God. I want a normal world again. Okay,
I know.
I really do. Do you hear me? I want normal. Okay, yes. We're at close, and let me tell you what I wanted to bring up to you, because you're going to appreciate this.
Talk to me.
I had a funny thing happen the other day. I actually watched the evening news.
Yeah.
I haven't watched the evening news in years.
Okay, so you watch the evening news. Which one?
I'm not going to say which one.
Okay, you watch one of them, and?
I found out that there's a whole different world in how Trump is covered on the evening news than how you and I see it, the way we get it from Twitter or this or reading the New York Times or whatever.
And he doesn't seem crazy.
Absolutely. It could have been 1950, whatever it was, when Eisenhower was the president. Yeah. Having a lovely day on the golf course.
Right. It's just respectful, and
it was respectful. It was, and we had a hard week. And he
said this. His critics said that.
No, they didn't even go into the specific. Listen, it's a 20-second soundbite, so they can't do that. But what they did say, it was the President of the United States had a day off today. He went to the links. He's had a rough week. Here he is with his buddies. Doesn't he look happy? It's a lovely day. It's Mother's Day.
It's a different news.
Which I want to do an experiment. I want to watch the evening news every day now. I'm going to do that till next week.
I'm going to do it with you.
And you do it with me.
Okay, we'll report back next week.
And we will report back. And I don't know, we'll talk off air about it, about whether we watch the same channel or different channel. But
yeah, we're going to coordinate.
But we're going to watch on, network television, and we're going to report back to you guys.
Old-fashioned evening news. I like it.
There's something going on in this country, and that may be why people don't know what we know.
Okay, we're going to check it out.
All right, that's it. I'm done.
Take care.
You are listening to the Halli Casser-Jayne Show. The Halli Casser-Jayne Show posts new podcasts Wednesdays, 3 p.m. Eastern at hallicasserjayne.com and is available wherever you listen to your podcasts. Be sure to find us on Google Podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Pocket Casts, iHeart Podcasts, on all your favorite apps. You can find the Halli Casser-Jayne Show on your Alexa device too. Just say the Halli Casser-Jayne Show. Oh, and come play with me on Twitter at the Halli CJ Show. On the Halli Casser-Jayne Show, we're all into challenging myths. So, this week, we take on the busting of a myth indelibly woven into the founding of the Republic that is the United States of America, that our nation was founded on judeo-christian principles. Here's why. In today's contentious political climate, understanding religion's role in American government is more important than ever. Christian nationalists do indeed assert that our nation was founded on judeo-christian principles and advocate an agenda based on this popular historical claim. But is this belief true? Do the Ten Commandments, In God We Trust, George Washington's prayer at Valley Forge, and other historical evidence prove that America was founded on Judeo-Christian principles? Are the Ten Commandments the basis for American law? Andrew Seidel, a constitutional attorney, dives into the debate about religion's role in America's founding, and he argues that our founding fathers did not, as is previously thought, look to the Bible when they drafted the pillar of the United States, the Declaration of Independence. Let's talk with the author of a controversial new book, The Founding Myth, Why Christian Nationalism is Un-American, Andrew L. Seidel.
Hi, Halli.
Hi, Andrew. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm terrific. Thank you so much for being here. I am just tickled with this one. I've been having fun all week reading a really interesting book. It's a subject that I find fascinating. Let's start here, though. This first of all, this is an argument which civil wars are built on. So, I mean, this is going to be fun.
Indeed.
Right? All right. So
I hope so, yeah.
Okay. But before we get into the weeds, I want a definition. This book is wrapped around Christian nationalism, and I want you to talk to me about what you define that term as and what are its roots.
So Christian nationalism is a very simple idea. It's the belief that the United States was founded as a Christian nation, that it was built on Judeo-Christian principles, and that we've somehow strayed from those principles and we need to return to that founding. And Christian nationalism in the past was sort of this fringe political theology. You saw it on the fringes of conservative politics, the fringes on conservative religion, but really with the election of Donald Trump, it kind of entered the mainstream. I mean, he rode his way into the White House on this wave of Christian nationalism. So it's really more relevant now than ever before in our nation's history.
So you say that the founding fathers didn't look at the Bible in drafting the Declaration of Independence, even though they are direct references to God. Even in the opening paragraph, I went back and read it. Laws of nature and nature's God, capitalized. And in the second paragraph, creator, capitalized. I want to talk about this a little bit before we really get into Trump. Talk to me.
And the Declaration of Independence to me is this fascinating document. And before you get into the specific references, and I do that in the book, I go over every one of those supposedly Christian references in the document, and I look at them to see, I tell the story about where they came from and how they were added and what they really mean. But, before you even do that, you can take a step back and you can look at the Declaration and ask, what did it do? And this was a document of rebellion. It severed our political connection with Great Britain. And that right there is an anti-biblical idea. The Bible says that the governments on earth were ordained and established by God and that you can't rebel against them because to do so is to rebel against God. It's right there in Romans 13. So right there we have a conflict between the Declaration and the principles of the Bible. But there's another conflict too, which is even bigger probably. The Declaration also says that governments get their power and their legitimacy from the people. And the Bible says something completely different. It says that governments are ordained by God. So again, you see this fundamental conflict between biblical principles and the principles in the Declaration of Independence. And that conflict is so great that even if there are a few mentions that touch on religion in the document, they couldn't overcome that conflict. But if you want to talk specifics, the laws of nature and of nature's God, that's not a reference to the Judeo-Christian God. I mean, there's nothing in there about Christ. Thomas Jefferson could have said, the laws of Jesus, but he didn't. He chose to say the laws of nature and of nature's God. And this is very clearly a reference to natural law. And I actually show the reader in the founding myth other times that Thomas Jefferson used similar language, and he explained it more in depth. So we know exactly what he was talking about here. And he wasn't talking about a supernatural deity. He was simply talking about natural law.
You're an attorney. You spend your time
I am
prosecuting this kind of stuff, right? When this conflict of religion and politics kind of go at each other's throat. But I'm curious about your own beliefs and how they affect how you've been looking at this. What are they?
So I am an atheist. I'm happy to adopt that label. And in the book, I treated religious beliefs like any other idea. I mean, they're ideas. Sometimes they're more fervently defended, and they can often seem immune to reasoned argument. But I treated religion just like any other idea, not with contempt, but not with any undue respect either. And to me, Christian nationalism has succeeded in part because of Americans' ingrained unwillingness to offend religious sensibilities. But if we cater to those sensibilities, we're limiting our search for the truth. And so I think there's a lot of strength in throwing off those self-imposed restraints. And that's what I sought to do in this book. Again, not to be offensive on purpose, but not to treat religion with kid gloves either, to tell the truth as it is.
I could go 1,000 different avenues, rat holes down with you on this one, because there is something, in my personal opinion, that's contemptuous about using religion the way it's been starting to be used or has been used at other times, surely, but right now it's at its peak in manipulating the American people. But I'll hold back for a second. There's virtually no reference to God, the creator, in the American Constitution, other than in the First Amendment. And I think that's a point we'll support your thinking. Talk to me about that a little bit.
I mean, the Constitution is absolutely a godless document. There is no reference at all to God in there. And in fact, it was criticized at the time for lacking that reference. Every other governing document in history relied on a deity in some way. Instead, the Constitution relied on we the people as its source of power. That was revolutionary at that time, and it was heavily criticized. But we know it was intentionally godless. And as you said, the only mentions of religion are exclusionary. So you have Article 6, which bans religious tests for public office, and then you have the First Amendment, which keeps religion out of government and government out of religion. So its only mentions of religion are exclusionary. And to me, that is a very, very difficult argument for the Christian nationalists to fight back against. Our Constitution is godless, and deliberately so.
In fact, you go so far. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, it's something we ought to be proud of. Our nation was the first nation to separate state and church. No other country in the history of the world up to that point had actually attempted to do that. It's an the wall of separation between state and church is an American original. And I think we ought to be proud of that fact. And instead you have the Christian nationalists seizing power and trying to tear down that wall right now.
Yeah. And let's hold off on that, because I wanted to get one more point in before we get into that separation of church and state. Let me look at this. The subtitle of the book, Why Christian Nationalism is Un-American. Christian principles are absolutely opposed to American principles. And you even go further than that. And you say that America was not founded on the values and principles on display in the Bible, that most biblical principles, hell, original sin, faith, obedience, absolutely conflict with America's founding principles. Talk to me more about that, because that gets into the heart of it.
You're absolutely right. The central question that the book asks, the founding myth asks, is did judeo-christian principles positively influence the founding of the United States? That's the central question that I set out to investigate. And what I found was no, they didn't. And it's not only that they didn't, but it's a good thing that America is not founded on judeo-christian principles, because they do conflict in very serious and fundamental ways with those principles that Americans hold and cherish as most dear. So to me, we have to call out things that are un-American as such. And I really, that's the whole argument that the book tries to lay out. I compare those individual biblical principles, including some of the ones that you mentioned, to our founding principles. And every turn I saw this fundamental, irreconcilable conflict. The same thing with the Ten Commandments. I have a whole section of the founding myth where I compare each of the Ten Commandments to those principles that our nation was founded on. And you see this irreconcilable conflict. And that's the central point that I'm trying to make throughout the founding myth.
It's a lot for a lot of people to swallow, I am sure.
And that's why there's tons of citations in the book, so everybody can go check my work if they want.
Oh yeah, no. I say that only because wait till you see where I'm going to take you on this. Because I'm ready. Let's do it. Let's get there. First of all, let's go back to the separation of church and state and Jefferson's contribution to the Constitution. Constitution used to be America's golden rule, the separation of church and state. When I was growing up, it was. You never saw it. Mm-hmm. Obviously, no more. So we can argue that America is truly in decline. All right. But let's assume for our discussion it is. Is it possible that the demise of America began when politicians began and religious leaders who owned a lot of politicians because they gave lots and lots of money, began inserting their religious beliefs into the legislative process? Is that what the founding fathers were actually afraid of? And here we are.
It is one of the things that they were most afraid of. And, they really did their best to keep religion and government separate. And they did it for a couple different reasons. One, and probably the most primary, is that religion is divisive. Historically, it's one of the most divisive forces known to humanity. And when you have a democratic republic, a government that's based on reasoned debate and compromise, if you inject religion into that, it can grind that government to a halt. One, because it causes division, and two, because it changes stances of politics into instead articles of faith, which you can't budge in any way, shape, or form, and which then grind our government to a halt. And that should be ringing a lot of bells for people today. If you look at Congress and what's happening, you can see both that division and that gridlock, and a lot of it is attributable to the infiltration of religion into our government.
Let's talk about the ways in which these Christian nationalists use that religion. But before we do that, I want to say this to you and I'd like to see what you have to say about it. Religion may not be religion at all in the context of what we're talking about right now. I'm seeing it as a cult. I'm seeing it as a language that they have. I've infiltrated some of these people. I've gone in there. I've talked to them. I've spent months, years with them. They have their own language, Andrew. It's bizarre. They have a way of speaking to each other. There's a code that goes into it all. Are they a cult? Are people like Jerry Falwell and Franklin Graham and some of the earlier ones not spiritualists at all, but people with a clear cultural agenda, indoctrinating people? Politics is just their vehicle for power. There is that aspect to it too, when everybody's being played. Your thoughts?
I think you're right on that. And the political theology of Christian nationalism, the very identity of the Christian nationalist, depends on the myths that are exposed in this book. Without historical support, many of their policy justifications crumble. Without that well of common myths for them to draw on, their identity will wither and fade, which does sound an awful lot like a cult when you think about it. Their entire political and ideological reality is actually incredibly weak and vulnerable because it's based on historical distortions and lies. And it's what you're talking about. It's this right-wing religious culture where lies have become so commonplace and so uncritically accepted that they can't even recognize the vulnerabilities anymore. So the purpose of the book is simple, if lofty. It's to utterly destroy the myths that underlie this un-American political ideology.
So this is how they foment that agenda. They go through politics. They go through our system. They attack our immigration policy. They use our education, our schools, a concept of equality. They go against religious freedom. They destroy women's rights. There's, of course, the social wars, abortion rights. There's all of that. Moral and ethical issues, this is how they control, by making them right and everybody else wrong. I call it seeking control of the masses. I'm surprised more people aren't up in arms about it.
Well, frankly, I am too, and that's one of the things that I hoped to do with this book was I'm trying to ring the alarm bell. The last chapter of the founding myth that takes its title from a James Madison quote, and it says it's proper to take alarm at the first experiment on our liberties. So I'm literally trying to ring this big alarm bell because I don't think that people realize what a threat Christian nationalism is. Christian nationalists are seeking to, at its core, redefine what it means to be an American. That to be a Christian is to be an American, and to be an American is to be a Christian. And they're going to reshape the law accordingly. But patriotism has no religion. And if I'm right, if this is a fight about what it means to be an American, this is not a fight that we can afford to lose. These lies and these myths are destroying our country. They're gnawing away at our liberty. And I think that we, the people, have a duty to stand up to the lies and to the bullies that are pushing them.
Yeah, but here's the problem we're up against. We're up against massive TV agenda, televangelism. We're up against them owning airwaves. We're up against them owning now, great news organizations. I don't think American, and there are a lot of Christians out there. Now, we're not attacking Christians, and I want to make that point clear. At least I'm not. I'm simply saying they've been manipulated by their leaders, if you will. So I'm not sure that's fair to attack them because what you hear is what you believe. I mean, I was raised Jewish. I'm one of those people who went and questioned why I should be a Jew. I stayed there because that's what I believed thereafter, but not everybody does. Most people do, though.
I think you're right, and I think that's what the founding myth does differently than some other books out there on this issue. Previous books, they've offered this gentle correction to the Christian nationalists. Here's what history tells us. Here's what the founders actually meant. Here's what the founders said. And then they kind of leave it at that. But correction is not enough. Otherwise, we wouldn't have a President Trump. So pointing out errors is insufficient. So the founding myth does that, but then it takes the next step. It goes on the offensive. So this book is an assault on the Christian nationalist identity. Not only are Christian nationalists factually wrong, but their beliefs and their identity run counter to the ideals on which this nation was founded. They are un-American. And that is a fight that we can win. And if we do, it will really, really dismantle their political power.
So I want to take it to Trump and to Pence. You and I don't agree with most political pundits on this, obviously, because this weird cocktail of so-called leadership that we got, which has, by the way, been a long, long time in the making. I want to repeat that over and again. I was in Virginia in the 80s when this thing was really percolating and infiltrating everything. Yeah. It was bizarre. The schools. Yeah, it was pretty strange stuff to watch. But we need to talk about that because most people think Trump got in there on race and religion, political affiliation, yada, yada, yada. I mean, he got in there because these people put him there. What happens when he's gone?
I mean, you're absolutely right. It's really fascinating. There's been a bunch of work done in the wake of the 2016 election, looking at the data and figuring out what happened. And Andrew Whitehead out of Clemson did some really interesting research, and he looked at what was the best predictor of a Trump voter. And it turns out that it wasn't their race or their beliefs on race. It wasn't their socioeconomic status. It wasn't even their political party or even their religion. It was whether or not that person believed that the United States was a Christian nation. That was the best predictor for somebody who was a Donald Trump voter in 2016. So Trump rode a wave of Christian nationalism into public office. And remember, Christian nationalism is this political theology that is based on all these lies and myths. It is fundamentally not true, and yet it put a reality TV show star into the highest office in the land, the most powerful office in the world. And that, to me, is a huge problem, and that's why Christian nationalism is such a threat, and why every American needs to arm themselves against it with the arguments that I lay out in the founding myth.
Right. Not attack Christianity per se, attack the nationalism, if you will, and what its effects are on the government, if you will, on the founding principle of the United States.
Exactly. Yeah. It's this Christian nationalism is this incestuous marriage between conservative politics and conservative religion. Exactly. It's not just religion and it's not just politics. It's this mix. And again, that mix is exactly one of the things the founders of this nation were trying to avoid.
Here's what concerns me, and we have to close on this. We have a minute. Bottom line, this is where we are. We got Trump, we got Pence, we got this whole mess. And we have the courts now have been completely embedded with all of them, right? That's pretty scary. It does take years to unwind that. And there are, a lot of other places within the government that have been wound into something new and something frightening, if you will. So, last question for you. Can America be saved?
Absolutely. I definitely believe that. And that's one of the reasons that I'm so proud that this book is coming out now, because now is the time for us to take action. It is not too late. Right now, in 2 years, it might be. But right now, Christian nationalism is still trying to seize and consolidate its power. And if we can fight back at this moment, we might be able to save America.
Thank you, Andrew. Great conversation. Great book.
Thank you, Halli. Much appreciated.
Sure. I've been speaking with Andrew L. Seidel, constitutional attorney at the Freedom from Religion Foundation, contributor to Fox and Friends, MSNBC, and The O'Reilly Factor. His book is The Founding Myth, Why Christian Nationalism is Un-American. To learn more about Andrew, visit andrewlseidel.com and follow him at Andrew L. Seidel on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Halli Casser-Jayne Show. The Halli Casser-Jayne Show is a production of Resec, LLC. Be sure to tune in to the Halli Casser-Jayne Show at hallicasserjayne.com or listen on your favorite app. New podcasts are posted Wednesdays, 3 p.m. Eastern.